He's eating the Whopperito.
I got it.
Have you seen the Whopperito?
No.
In person? Okay, you haven't seen the Whopperito. You've got to have Whopperito. Tonight we have Donald Trump's big immigration speech, Hillary Clinton's pre-buttal, and the whole enchilada. On a day when a new ABC News Washington Post poll shows that Clinton's unfavorability rating is creeping up into Donald Trump territory, El Donaldo flew to Mexico City for his first meeting with the foreign head of state. Hours before his eagerly awaited address on immigration tonight in Phoenix, Arizona, Trump sat down with Mexican President Enrique Pena Nieto for a private discussion about that very issue, which, in a statement afterward, Trump called substantive and direct before launching into a scripted, subdued, but still sharp warning about open borders and open trade.
In both Mexico and the United States, this is a humanitarian disaster. Having a secure border is a sovereign right and mutually beneficial. We recognize and respect the right of either country to build a physical barrier or wall on any of its borders to stop the illegal movement of people, drugs, and weapons. Cooperation toward achieving this shared objective, and it will be shared, of safety for all citizens is paramount to both the United States and to Mexico.
Trump went on to say that he and Pena had not discussed who would pay for that border wall. Earlier today, in a speech to the American Legion in Cincinnati, Hillary Clinton instructed voters to pay no attention to the man south of the border, telling them to not to confer trust in Trump just because he met with a world leader.
Getting countries working together was my job every day as your Secretary of State. It's more than a photo op. It takes consistency and reliability. And it certainly takes more than trying to make up for a year of insults and insinuations by dropping in on our neighbors for a few hours and then flying home again. That is not how it works.
Nicole, we are going to talk about Donald Trump's immigration speech tonight in a moment. But this trip, hastily arranged, kind of haphazard in its organization and announcement, it's kind of a risky gambit for any presidential nominee to undertake. Did it pay off?
Well, listen, I think you have to separate out the stagecraft, because voters that have maybe not been paying close attention all summer, like we have, people who had their kids home from school, may have turned on the TV tonight and seen Donald Trump looking differently than he usually looks. He was in a foreign country, standing shoulder to shoulder with a foreign leader. Hillary Clinton is right. It doesn't erase everything that he said over the last year. I think Jeb Bush would agree with that assessment, too. But in terms of where the race stands today, they are both trying to appeal to a very small group of voters who really don't like either one of them. It's not the typical swing voter. It's a group of voters who are not sold on either one. And they may have seen a new Donald Trump today in appearance.
Trump was very low energy today. I mean, he made your old friend Jeb Bush look hyperactive in terms of his performance. I think the reason that nominees go to foreign countries is to try to look presidential and to give people a sense of what it might look like if they were president. They had to do a lot of these meetings.
Well, that's why Donald Trump went. Some of them go just to learn who the other leaders might be that they would work with.
Well, yes, it is. Turns out that's why Trump went today. To me, there were a lot of questions about what the goal of this trip was. It turned out to be a pretty conventional goal, right, which was to give the impression that he could have a calm, sober, subdued appearance. I don't know whether this, coming into this immigration speech, whether Trump's core supporters look at that and say, that's the tough-talking Donald Trump who's going to take it to the Mexicans. I don't know if they look at that. But certainly for those people in the middle of the electorate who look at that and worry that Trump is such a hothead that anything he does outside of American soil or on American soil is going to blow up, that was at least not a blowing up. It was not a conflagration.
And in terms of where he is, there are some voters out there who the fact that he didn't show up in a foreign country and get run out of the place, that was a good day for Trump.
Yes, and again, we're setting the bar low.
Very low.
Now, let's be clear. We're setting the bar low, but that's sometimes where you have to set the bar. He did pass it today, and again, now we move on to the second topic, which is really the more important one.
Right. So later tonight in Arizona, Donald Trump will, at long last, share his TBD immigration plan on how he'd handle the estimated 11 million undocumented immigrants currently living in the United States. In recent interviews, Trump's team has suggested he may be backing off that previous posture of mass deportations by refusing to call it a reversal or maybe even sort of a softening. Trump will likely double doubled down, though, on his opposition to sanctuary cities. And I'm guessing we'll hear about that wall he says he'll build, despite the fact that it didn't get all that much airtime in Mexico. But Trump is walking a high wire here as he tries to distance himself from his primary era proposals that just might not play that well in a general election. John, how long can he pull off this balancing act between pleasing his base and winning over the undecideds?
Well, the problem for him, right, if you listen to what Kellyanne Conway has been saying, you listen to what Donald Trump Jr. has been saying, and you listen to everything that's been happening over the last couple of weeks, there is a softening happening here, right? He is not going to get up on stage tonight, I don't think, and say, I want to bring the deportation force and kick out 11 million people out of the country.
Right.
So if that softening has taken place, but it's a vague softening, there's no detail. He tries to stay away from that issue, talk about the wall, talk about enforcing the law. I don't think it helps him that much in the sense that all of the things he said in the past are still there. And the Clinton campaign is already making clear they are going to keep reminding voters day in and day out of what he said about Mexican rapists, what he said about the deportation force, all of that past stuff. It's never in the past anymore. The past is always still present.
And I think the notion that he will now be sort of labeled as being at the same place where Marco Rubio and Jeb Bush were, and he didn't just have a policy disagreement with them during the primary, he destroyed them. He ridiculed them. He called them soft. He called them weak. He's also insulted Paul Ryan for his posture on immigration. So his attacks on immigration were among the harshest that he leveled in the primary. So the fact that he's now adopting the same positions they had because he understands a little bit more how difficult this problem is interesting at best.
The idea that you can say, again, Kellyanne Conway this morning on television said, this is now going to be no reversals. And she said history basically began with the Republican, with his acceptance speech in Cleveland. If you go back to that, that's when he became the nominee. And he didn't mention the deportation force then. So she wants to set the clock in July. I just don't think that washes. He has really two. If he wants to clear this up, he has to clear it up. He either has to say, I'm for a deportation force, or talk in an explicit way about what to do with the 11 million, or he has to say, listen, guys, I was wrong before. I don't think he's going to do either one of those things. And if he doesn't do either one of those things, it will continue to haunt him, I think, going forward.
I think that's right. And I think, I think the political question becomes, does it dampen the spirits and the excitement that some of his hardcore base had for him? Because that's what they were excited about.
We will get to talk to Ann Coulter about this very issue, because she's the litmus test on hard-line immigration policy on the right. Okay, so while Donald Trump was doing his immigration thing, Hillary Clinton was on offense today. She started the morning by rolling out yet another Republican national security endorsement. This time it was James Cladd, the former Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense under President George W. Bush, whom Nicole worked for. Then, in that American Legion speech in the shining city of Cincinnati, Clinton tried to reclaim the mantle of American exceptionalism, which Republicans have spent the past 8 years claiming that Barack Obama and his Democratic Party have abandoned as a guiding principle of American foreign policy.
My opponent in this race has said very clearly that he thinks American exceptionalism is insulting to the rest of the world. In fact, when Vladimir Putin, of all people, criticized American exceptionalism, my opponent agreed with him, saying, and I quote, if you're in Russia, you don't want to hear that America is exceptional. Well, maybe you don't want to hear it, but that doesn't mean it's not true.
So, Nicole, simple question. How effective do you think Clinton was at counter-programming today against all this Trump news?
Listen, if you're on the campaign that is confident enough that your base is sufficiently excited about you, that you're going after Republicans, and that's what Hillary Clinton is doing with this message, then you're on stronger terrain than your opponent, and there's no doubt that she's on stronger terrain with this message. I think the challenge for them, I think on the question of commander-in-chiefness, they certainly have made the case that there are bipartisan people who support her over him. They need to now extend the argument to the economy. Her economic message is still very polarizing. Republicans and small business owners still fear a more liberal policy agenda than even we had when President Obama ran.
Although we did see last week they rolled out all those former heads of the Council of Economic Advisors, including a lot of Republicans, all of them trashing Donald Trump's economic plans too. Look, it bears saying a little bit more about American exceptionalism. It is the case that for 8 years, I think totally unfairly. Republicans have said Barack Obama doesn't believe in it. He's tried to fight back against that. He tried to say multiple times that he does believe in it. But to hear Hillary Clinton kind of just grab that and say, you know what, not only am I not defending Barack Obama, I'm saying that I believe in American exceptionalism and that Donald Trump doesn't believe in American exceptionalism. It's, I think, not just a thing about national security. It's another place in which she's tried to say to Republicans, all of those suburban Republican, college-educated voters we hear about, you've talked about a lot, she's saying to all of them, he's not a normal Republican. It's not okay for you, if you're a normal Republican, to vote for this guy because in many ways, first last week in the alt-right speech about issues of race and bigotry, but here on foreign policy, this guy is way off outside the Republican mainstream.
And I think if she can now, and you talked about it on questions of race, she talked about national security, if she can seal the deal with that group of voters on questions of the economy, then I think she's on very firm footing going into the debates.
Right, and I think it's harder to do that. I mean, I think rolling out the endorsements helps. Right? I mean, you get all these big names. There are a lot bigger names in Republican national security.
But they help because she's in a hole. Yes. They help because her image has become one of a polarizing figure. She is not seen the way she was seen as a senator from New York. She is seen as a more polarizing figure.
100%. All right.
So when we come back, we'll head to Mexico City, where all the action is, for some more reporting on Trump's trip after these words from John's sponsors.
Municipal bonds don't typically get the media coverage that the stock market does. In fact, some people may even find them boring. What they typically do offer is income that's federally tax-free. Municipal bonds from Hennion & Walsh can give you income that's tax-free, and you have to admit, tax-free income can be very exciting. At Hennion & Walsh, we offer you tax-free municipal bonds from across the country, so you can benefit from tax-free income wherever you live. There's nothing boring about that. If you have at least $10,000 to invest, we want to send you our exclusive bond guide for free. 1-800-895-7895. That's 1-800-895-7895. We're out to prove that tax-free income can be very exciting indeed. For your free bond guide, call now. 1-800-895-7895. 1-800-895-7895.
For decades, we've looked at home security the same. Set your alarm, leave your home, and you're alerted when someone breaks in. The Ring video doorbell can prevent a crime before it happens. Ring lets you see and speak with whoever's at your home from anywhere.
Hello?
I'm doing a free house painting estimates.
I'm bathing the children right now.
With Ring, you're always home. Available at ring.com.
Hello.
I'm Haslinda Amin.
I'm Paul Allen.
I'm Sherry Ann.
I'm Stephen Engel.
I'm Emily Chang.
Reporting from
Davos,
London, Sydney, Tokyo, New York,
Hong Kong,
Singapore,
San Francisco, bringing you
breaking news about the economy,
the environment,
the situation,
upcoming events.
Today's story. It looks like it's going to be
a big win,
a short-term solution,
a long night.
Joining us now from Bloomberg's bureau in Mexico City, Bloomberg reporter Eric Martin. Hello, Eric. Tell us what went down today in Mexico City.
Absolutely extraordinary press conference and meeting today between Donald Trump and Mexican President Enrique Pena Nieto. This all came together in the last 24 hours from what we know. They agreed on a lot of things, or said in the press conference that they agreed on a lot of things, but at the same time, they skirted a lot of the hard issues. President Pena Nieto said that Trump's rhetoric has hurt the Mexican people, perhaps a nod to the comments about rapists and criminals. Donald Trump said that they discussed the wall and each country's right to secure its borders, but they didn't discuss who would pay for the wall. And so a lot of the things that have really damaged and been friction points in that relationship don't sound like they were on the agenda. I mean, a surprising meeting and a really interesting one, but one in which we really didn't see that clash and some of those tensions on display.
So President Pena Nieto has compared Donald Trump to, talked about him in the context of Hitler, talked about him in the context of Mussolini. How happy did he seem to be sharing the stage today, from your point of view, with Donald Trump?
President Pena, looked very focused, very serious. But there was certainly, we got a curveball at the end of the thing where we had been told that there were going to be no questions. And then at the end of Donald Trump's statement, some of the reporters who have been covering him started shouting questions. And as Donald Trump is wont to do, he begins answering them. And President Pena Nieto didn't quite know what to do with that. He may have a longer track record at this point than Hillary Clinton in terms of not holding a press conference, at least in Mexico. He sometimes will speak to the press extemporaneously when he travels, but I can't remember the last time we had a presidential press conference with questions in Mexico. And so, he answered a little bit, talked about that rhetoric, which I just mentioned, but it was a little bit of an uncomfortable moment in terms of Donald Trump, as he often does, going off script.
What struck me was Donald Trump's comments about NAFTA. He said it's turned out better for Mexico than the U.S. Do you have any reporting in Mexico about how is the government of that opinion, or was there anything before this meeting or coming out of it about taking a new look or partnering with Donald Trump to take a fresh look at NAFTA?
Well, that is certainly one place where the Mexican government does not agree with Donald Trump. The Mexican government is always highlighting the benefits to the U.S. from this relationship. They talk about how much U.S. content goes into every dollar of exports from Mexico. They talk about the benefits of cross-border production chains, supply chains, particularly the auto industry is a big one in Mexico. And so that's a point of view, when Donald Trump and President Pena Nieto both talk about modernizing NAFTA, I'm not sure that they're talking about the same thing.
Eric, when the news broke this morning that this was going to happen, that Donald Trump was heading to Mexico City, there was the news reports that said there might be protests, there might be outrage in the streets among Mexicans about Trump's arrival. How much of that actually played out?
We didn't see a lot of that, but there was really scant time to be able to organize anything. Right. Behind me is the traditional rallying and protest point, the Angel of Independence Monument. And, people who might have opposed this had less than 12 hours, or a little over 12 hours, really, to organize things once the news came out. So we saw people going to Twitter and talking about how Mexico had so little to gain from this, and Trump is doing badly in the polls. So Mexicans who oppose him talking about how breathe new life into his campaign, but we haven't seen a lot in terms of actual people out in the streets, really showing that opposition and that criticism of Pena Nieto, who, by the way, is suffering from record low popularity for a Mexican president.
One of the benefits of doing this quickly, avoiding
exactly.
The opposition.
Note to anyone who fears a protester. Announced at the last minute. We are smarter for your reporting, Eric Martin. Thank you very much. Up next, a preview of Trump's immigration speech and the response we can expect from Hillary Clinton's campaign right after this.
In San Francisco, a lot of tech action.
Our top stories this morning in D.C.
The Dow and the S&P, they surge.
We wake up every morning and ask ourselves, what's possible? I'm Stephanie. I work for Coke at Georgia Pacific's Innovation Institute. As a research scientist, I'm part of a team that studies paper products. We search for ways to improve quality and reduce environmental impact. I love making products that improve people's lives. When you keep an open mind, the possibilities are endless. We are Coke.
Farm fresh ingredients, step-by-step recipes, delivered to your door for less than $9 a meal. Get $30 off your first delivery at blueapron.com/cook.
Frost was on the pumpkin that cold Boston morn, and Gronkowski was on Jim Baden's mind.
I was feeling a bit Gronky, so I said, why not?
Without Jim, I wouldn't have been in Jim's lineup.
With a last-minute switch, Jim, a.k.a. Holy Gronkamole, racked up 310 points.
One word.
Grok.
2 words.
The Grok.
Where was this film crew when I won the week before, huh?
Make your moment at DraftKings. Play in the free $100,000 contest week 1. Use promo code STREAK.
Why are you so cheerful today? I had a fantastic week trading my Interactive Brokers account. Wait, are you an active trader too?
I'm not, but I found a terrific financial advisor at Interactive Brokers Investors Marketplace. He manages my account, he built the perfect portfolio for me, put me into a couple of hedge funds that are doing great.
How do you select the hedge funds?
They're listed at the Interactive Brokers Marketplace. You should look them up.
Learn more at interactivebrokers.com/IB Marketplace.
We are joined by the Jennifers of Bloomberg, or at least two of them. A couple of reporters who are covering opposite ends of the campaign trail on opposite sides of the country today. On this set, right here with us, we have Jennifer Epstein, who spends most of her waking hours tracking Hillary Clinton. And out in Phoenix, Arizona, we have Jennifer Jacobs, who is all over the Trump beat. Jennifer Jacobs, I'm going to start with you, just because this is like kind of a Donaldy day. We've talked already about what happened in Mexico. Trump's now on his way back to Arizona. This speech, so highly anticipated, on the basis of your reporting, he is going to say what on the important matters of controversy?
What I'm told is he's going to lay out some of the things he just mentioned in that press conference in Mexico. You heard him talk about how he has those 5 goals. And I'm told that he will, that was a foreshadow of what he's going to say tonight in his speech. I'm in Phoenix, and I was just driving by the venue, and the place is already surrounded by a huge line of people really excited to go see him talk about this. What he's going to talk about is he's going to talk about securing the border. No surprise. He's going to talk about cracking down on illegal immigration. He's going to talk about improving NAFTA. He's going to talk about stopping the flow of drugs into this country. He's going to talk about keeping manufacturing wealth in this country. He's going to go through some of those things he ticked through just now in that press conference.
Jennifer Jacobs, what are you hearing internally about how we came to land on the word softening, which is fast becoming my least favorite word in the dictionary? Because they didn't seem ready to change the policy, but it seems like maybe Kellyanne and some of the communicators wanted him to soften his image among this group. What do you hear about the debate around that word?
Right. I'm not so sure that that was his word and that came out of his thinking. Someone else suggested it to him, and he agreed. What he was trying to do, he was trying to say the exact same things he's been saying in the primary, but say it in a way that's not offensive to general election voters. And so he had that softening, hardening quote where he said, I'm kind of doing both, which is fairly typical. What his campaign aides don't want him to do is to just really upset and be abrasive to, those voters that he's really trying to appeal to. Every speech he gives now, he gives a direct appeal to black voters and Hispanic voters. It's every single speech, and they are really hammering that hard.
Jennifer Epstein, so today the Clinton campaign put out a video, which is one of the weirder pieces of art I've seen in a while. It could play as a short. It could play as a short at Cannes.
They would appreciate that.
But it basically was a Rorschach test, and essentially was trying to do what we discussed earlier in the show, which is say, whatever Trump says tonight doesn't really matter. We're going to hold him accountable for what he said before. How nervous are they that Trump can fuzz this issue up, especially on deportation, and take some of the edge off politically?
I think they are concerned, and not just on immigration issues and deportation in particular, but in general, that they worry that now that people are tuning in, that people will tune in even more after Labor Day, that whatever he says now may be all that sticks in voters' heads when they go to the polls. And they are concerned that what he's saying now may not reflect what he actually, believes or intends to do, and that really what she keeps saying over and over again, and she's been saying this for months, is look at what he's done over the course of his life, the course of his career. Don't just listen to what he's saying now at the very end, home stretch of the campaign. But it really does speak to a concern that some people who are just starting to pay attention are going to be are going to hear whatever he says. So, I'm not going to deport everybody, and they're going to just go with that, and that they're going to make their voting decision based on those things, and that may not be as favorable to Secretary Clinton as, if you listen to what he said a year ago on immigration.
Is there any debate inside the Clinton campaign about how to attack him, whether to sort of paint him as the most extreme version of a Republican, or like to do what she did today, which is to paint him as something totally outside the right-left ideological spectrum and to treat him as other and to try to bring into her camp, but Democrats and Republicans?
I mean, it does seem like the focus has been on the other. I mean, certainly with the speech that she gave on the alt-right last week, there's definitely been within kind of the broader Democratic operative universe some debate, because there is a concern that if she says that this guy is different from the Republican mainstream, she's not doing anything
the Senate
to help.
candidates off
Yeah,
the
she's
hook.
not doing anything to help the Democrats down ballot. And if anything, she's, and you're seeing this already in some of the polls, where she's leading in some of it, like in Florida, where she has a couple-point lead in polling averages, but Marco Rubio has the lead in the Senate race.
Right.
So there is this challenge for her to kind of maybe thread the needle a bit more toward at once saying, here is this guy who's outside the mainstream, but look, a lot of these candidates down ballot are doing the same thing, and he's pulled them outside the mainstream. And if you are mainstream, come with me.
I want to ask you both, we got to go quick here, but I'm going to start Jennifer Jacobs real quick. Donald Trump, they've made a whole big deal about how they were going on the air with this $10 million ad buy. Some of those ads some of that time's actually been bought, some not in certain states like Virginia and Colorado. Did you know anything about whether there may be a little bit of, let's call it softening on the question of that ad buy, the big ad buy they announced earlier?
No, they are not softening their ad buy. They've started advertising in about 5 states, and they're going to continue, and they're hitting 6 more very quickly. They do intend to still pursue those 11 key swing states that they're working the hardest in. Okay,
and Jen Epstein, I want to ask you this. 2 new polls in Wisconsin. A Marquette Law School poll, Clinton with only a 3-point lead over Trump. A Monmouth University poll, also of Wisconsin, Clinton with only a 5-point lead. Those are both margin of error polls in Wisconsin. How freaked out is Brooklyn going to be when they see those numbers?
Well, I think that they will pretend that, in some ways, they will pretend they're not freaked out at all, and they will discount those polls entirely. But then when they fundraise, they will say, uh-oh, we're in trouble. And I think in some of these upper Midwest states where there is a big white population, they have been concerned all along that the numbers that they've been seeing through the summer would not actually stick up come the fall.
All right, both Jennifers, thank you. You're great. We love you. Up next, a cult classic. We've got Ann Coulter right here in this studio after these words from our sponsors.
No softening. Our next guest, Ann Coulter, needs no introduction other than to say she has a new book out, and in my parents' house, she is considered a folk hero. It's called In Trump We Trust, E Pluribus. Awesome. And thanks for being here.
Okay, so lovely parents you must have.
The Mob book was their favorite.
That was a good one.
Like 3 books ago, right?
Uh-huh.
So I don't know if they're current, but I'm going to send this to them. Okay, so I'm going to start by reading a paragraph from the first chapter of this book. Okay, I'm going to read it from here. Until Trump ends the orderly transition of America from the greatest nation in history into some pathetic, third-rate, also-ran multicultural mess, until the bleeding has stopped, there's nothing Trump can do that won't be forgiven except change his immigration policies. But as Trump shows signs of softening, I know that's going to make you mad, his rhetoric on deportations, at least one person found the timing of your book release so funny. I've watched this 20 times. You have to watch it with me now.
Who knew that it would be Donald Trump to come along and convert the GOP base to supporting amnesty on the same week Ann Coulter's book comes out? Poor Ann.
Okay, so he either feels sorry for you or he's laughing at you. I mean, what is it? Do you reject it?
He wasn't the only
saying?
one, and it reminds me there is one lower form of humor than puns, and that is taking someone else's joke and then immediately repeating it. The night before, I'd been on Chris Matthews' Hardball and said this could be the shortest book tour ever if he softens.
I saw that, yeah.
Well, see, that's the same
So that's what
thing,
Rush is laughing at?
And everyone else. But I said it as a joke.
So did Rush just miss?
It's not just Rush, it was everybody. But who cares? I think Trump did it to get me some publicity for my book, because whenever I give him the slightest constructive criticism, and I've done it before, I'm not, you know, a Hillary cultist or a Ted Cruz cultist, I can support him and still give him helpful suggestions, which is what I did on the Hannity interview. I mean, simultaneously with the Hannity interview, he was giving magnificent speeches all last week in Tampa and Fredericksburg. No change in position, and I hadn't seen, they just handed me what he had said about this softening. And on closer examination, I mean, he was appearing there with the mothers of children who have been murdered by illegals. That never would have happened with another presidential candidate. And it was
you're talking about the 2 Fox town halls. The one, there were 2 of them last week. One of them was Sean.
Right. And it was Sean who was pressing him, and it was Sean using the Gang of 8 legerdemain about, oh, and they'll pay back taxes, and they're so law-abiding. And then so he was just repeating what Sean was saying. But no, I do not think there's going to be any softening, because the one thing, as I say in the book,
going to have a deportation force, and the 11 million will go.
We have one. It's called ICE.
No, I know, but you think, but he has changed.
I think he's going to enforce the laws, because he said approximately 1 million times. I mean, he really hasn't.
So what is Kellyanne Conway talking about? She said
you'll have to check with her.
But you think they're out of sync? You trust Trump's original statements on.
Look, the rhetoric perhaps could be softened. He started at 11. You can present it in a way that isn't going to frighten people, I suppose. It doesn't frighten me. But I mean, you've seen a lot of that going on basically since the convention. I happen to like his free-form jazz-style speeches where he tells jokes and calls out people and calls his opponents funny names. I think they're funny. But I understand that he needs to be a little more presidential now, and he is being more presidential. The speeches he's giving, and by the way, you should show those more. I notice the media is hiding them because they're excellent speeches.
But let's be clear about something. You think there's 11 million people? 11
no,
million
there are definitely more.
More. You think they should all be deported, right?
I don't think we should be giving them amnesty.
Right.
So
say they should be deported or not?
Yeah, but Trump has never said that week 1 we're going to have 40 million gone.
I didn't ask that question. I'm asking for you, for your point of view. You think they should all be deported, right?
Basically, yeah.
So if Trump ends up in some other place where he's talking about a pathway to citizenship or something else.
Pathway to citizenship would definitely be contrary to his whole plan.
You'd be done with him then, right?
No, he'd still be better than any others, but I wouldn't vote enthusiastically, and I doubt he'd win. It's more that I'm worried about him winning the election. And saying you're not going to do what you've been promising to do for a year, to soften the rhetoric, as I say, that's fine. But look, his entire platform, as I point out in the book, has been put America's interests first, whether it's trade, whether it's immigration, whether it's foreign wars, it's putting Americans first. So, look,
do you not think there's any security interest for the U.S. in taking these people out of the shadows and not granting them citizenship, but putting them on a pathway toward you couldn't live with any legal status?
It's not that I can't live with it. I don't think it's good for Americans.
You don't think it's good to bring people out of the shadows so that the police know where they are?
I think there are more transgenders in America than there are Americans worried about the comfort and security of people who broke into our country illegally, are living here illegally, are taking jobs illegally. How quickly it moves doesn't really matter. Yeah, of course, get rid of the worst ones first. But every illegal alien, including, and this I describe in the book, the most law-abiding illegal alien with one child in school costs Americans more than $12,000 a year just to educate that child. That's assuming, not even accounting for the astronomically expensive English as a second language classes, the free school lunches, the emergency rooms, the cars. No, this is all to get cheap labor for people who live in this neighborhood, by the way. But the illegal aliens don't live in this neighborhood. They come in to do the, maid work and the nannying, and then they go out and fill up other people's emergency rooms and other people's schools. And suddenly there's no money for the Christmas pageant that year because we're spending so much money on English as a second language. The point is, even the most law-abiding illegal alien is costing Americans a lot of money. We are a generous people. I never thought ICE or the deportation force, whatever you want to call it, would act in an angry and aggressive way. We're kind people. There may be some illegals, but why does the discussion always have to start with the hard case? We have not been enforcing laws on the books for 30, 40 years now. Why do you start with the wild outlier case and rearrange the whole solar system to deal with the one illegal alien? Let's get rid of the 40 million first.
Let me ask you this question, just on the basis of there was a big Pew poll last week that says, that said 2,000 people they asked, relatively big poll. 76% say that they think undocumented immigrants are as hardworking and as honest as most U.S. citizens. 71% say that they fill mostly jobs that U.S. citizens don't want. Only 61% are against the border wall, right? So why is it that you are in favor of so many proposals in your book that, in a general view of immigration, that is so far outside the American mainstream?
Well, I don't think it is, as I have an entire chapter in my last book, Adios America, which Donald Trump read, about how deceptive the immigration polls always are. And that one right there, without even hearing any more about the question, to ask about the illegal immigrants themselves. As I say, Americans are compassionate and kind people, and to be talking about it as if it's the people themselves. How about a question, should we enforce laws on the books about immigration, or should politicians and the plutocrats be able to bring in cheap nannies and gardeners that you end up having to pay for? How about just a poll question, should we have more or less immigration? Because that's overwhelmingly on my side. So these are utterly deceptive polls. Whenever they ask about the path to legalization, they're always loaded up with the kind of thing that Hannity was pushing Trump to say last week about paying back taxes, and they're law-abiding. Well, they're not law-abiding. There are lots of laws that have been broken. Back taxes means we, the taxpayer, pay each illegal alien about $30,000 in earned income tax credit refund. No illegal alien is making enough money to pay any taxes. So they're lying questions in polls. Whenever a poll is asked just simply and honestly, do you want more or less immigration? North Korea is more popular than illegal immigration. It is.
If Donald Trump loses...
It is. That's in my book. The poll actually shows that.
If Donald Trump loses, whose fault will it be?
I don't think he's going to lose.
You think all the polls are so flawed?
No, I won't discount all the polls, but I think they'll change. I still think it is. Look, I think it's more likely than not that he'll win. There's a possibility that he will lose.
Because even some of his advisors think that it's getting harder to see.
Thank God he doesn't listen to his advisors.
Well, that's true.
And the general advisors in here do not come off very well in this book. I mean, that's why Trump's got more votes than any other Republican in primary history, because he didn't have those Washington consultants, the pollsters, the think tanks, with all their idiotic talking points.
But if he loses,
whose fault will it be? You're a lovely girl.
Okay. But if he loses, whose fault will it be?
I don't know. That's a lot of, I'm piling on. We don't know what's going to happen. A lot of hypotheticals there. I could phrase it slightly differently, which is what you may be asking about. I don't know what Washington insiders think they're getting out of they're not never Trump crew. They're destroying the Republican Party one way or another. But if he loses, frankly, I don't think anything I do, I don't think anything you guys do is going to make a difference because the country's over.
And I got to ask you this question. Just because there's so many things. We spend a lot of time on this book. I have various factual issues with the book. I have tons of issues.
Like my quote of you.
I'd rather quote this. I'd rather quote your writing in here about Serge Kovaleski. One of the things when you did a poll, a Bloomberg Politics poll, asked people what most troubles them about Trump at various incidents. His mockery of Serge Kovaleski was the top of the poll. You wrote in the book, it's true that Trump was not mimicking any mannerisms that Serge has. He doesn't jerk around or flail his arms. He's not retarded. He sits calmly, but if you look at his wrists, you'll see they're curved in. That's not the imitation Trump was doing. He was doing a standard retard. So my question is, are you suggesting that he was impersonating not Serge Kovaleski, but what you regard as a standard disabled person? And if so, is that okay?
Okay.
And why this language?
There's a famous line from, what is it, Tropic Thunder, that's a whole little speech on, what's his name, Robert Downey Jr. advising one of the actors. You don't want to go full retard, you want to do half retard or something. Okay, you don't like the word, oh well. But the point remains, and moreover...
Just to be clear, I'm not sure it's me who doesn't like the word. I think it's a vast swath of American society who thinks...
You know what? I was called a lot of words this weekend, and I didn't mind. So I think we all need to develop a little thicker skin. But the point is, and I'm glad you got back to this, because something I didn't know when I wrote the book, and I'm writing about it in tonight's column, it is absolutely an outrageous, despicable, deliberate lie that the media has told about Donald Trump mocking a disabled person. He would not do that. He said he would not do that. And the proof positive of this is that in the exact same speech, he did the exact same imitation of a general. Right. And the media knew that, and they will not show us that clip. He has done the exact same imitation, flailing his arms, of Ted Cruz. This is how Donald Trump does an imitation of a flustered, cowardly person or frightened person. And moreover, when someone posted those videos on the Washington Post website in a perfectly respectful comment, the Washington Post instantly took it down because they don't want people to see maybe Trump isn't a good sketch actor, but he was not mocking a disabled man. That is a media lie.
Instead, what he was mocking was apparently, in your words, a standard retard.
That isn't standing. That's an acting. Famous acting trope of pretending to be a retard. You may not like my words. That's not the words Trump used. He was flailing his arms. He did it for a general. The general is not disabled. Ted Cruz is not disabled. Right. That is a media lie. Whether you like my words or not, that is, I don't lie. And that is a media lie.
For the record, don't like that word.
Ann Coulter. Always brave, never flustered. Again, her book is called In Trump We Trust. Up next, we'll talk about race and politics with Princeton professor Eddie Glaude. If you're watching us in Washington, D.C., you can now listen to us on the radio at Bloomberg 99.1 FM. We'll be right back.
Welcome back. We're joined now by Dr. Eddie Glaude Jr., who's the chair of the Center for African American Studies at Princeton University. He's got a book out called Democracy in Black, How Race Still Enslaves the American Soul. Eddie, thanks for coming back on the show. Bigotry, big topic in our campaign right now. Yeah. Donald Trump calls Hillary Clinton a bigot. Hillary Clinton basically calls Donald Trump a bigot. You say that's really an argument that only interests white people.
Yeah, it's not really about black folks, is it? It's really about who can be labeled what their positions are, and it's kind of indicative of the very ways in which African Americans are being courted in this election cycle. It's actually consistent with how we're often treated in these election cycles, and that is just simply as chess pawns to be moved about, and not as kind of thinking, rational political actors. And so to call Hillary Clinton a bigot is in some ways to say, I'm not a bigot. And for Hillary Clinton to say, well, just let's look at what he said, really has little to do with, well, what about the housing crisis and what happened in African American communities? What about double-digit unemployment? What about public education? What about employment, jobs? I mean, we can just, what about the current state of black communities, and how are your policies going to respond to that? So in some ways, John and Nicole, it's typical American racial theater. And typical American racial theater has little to do with black people. It has an effect on black people, but it has little to do with black people.
And why? What do you attribute that? I mean, why is that where we are? I mean, it sounds like that's your assessment of the state of the conversation around race. I have to say, I think these issues are more fraught and more complicated to discuss now than at any other point in my professional life. Yeah. What do you attribute that to? Well, it has something to do, I think, with the vitriol unleashed by the election of Barack Obama. I talk about in the book something called the value gap. We talk about the achievement gap and the wealth gap and even the empathy gap, but underneath it all is something more fundamental that is called the value gap, and that is the belief that white people matter more than others. And so when we tell the history of the country, right, even in the moment in which nobody raises their kids to think that.
No,
so when does it? Where does it?
It's not about an explicit belief. It's actually based in the oxygen. I always tell the story about all you got to do, you learn race, you learn the value gap, just by simply moving about in space, just driving in certain communities and driving out of those communities. We learn how certain folks are valued, how certain folks aren't valued, just by going to school, going to work. So all of this stuff is circulating. And even when we thought we turned a corner, right, with the election of the first African-American president, what did we see in response? We saw the vitriol of the Tea Party. We saw a wholesale attack on the voting rights of people of color. So it's a reassertion of I think, the value gap.
We have seen over the course of the past couple weeks Donald Trump doing this kind of ostentatious outreach, ostensible outreach to African Americans, although he has not yet spoken really in front of African American audiences. Right. But there's an argument he's making, which is that Hillary Clinton and the Democratic Party take African American votes for granted and then don't do very much in terms of their policies. Now, put aside the question of whether you think Trump would be any better. Right. Is there something to the argument?
Absolutely. Absolutely. You know, in political science literature, my colleague Paul Freimer talks about African-American voters as a captured electorate. And that is, the Democrats can take them for granted. The only thing they have to do is deliver them every 2 and 4 years with no promise of delivering on policy. And the Republicans just have to take a certain percentage in order to jeopardize the Democrats' chance of voting. But they really don't care or are concerned about the issues facing black communities. So what you have is a kind of a constituency that has a distorted relationship to the democratic process. In other words, folk try to herd us to the polls like cattle chewing cud, right? And so I think Trump is the wrong messenger.
Right.
Right. I mean, I can't take him seriously. I can't even take some Republicans seriously. Look at what's happening in North Carolina. Right. So Republicans are going to say, give us a chance. And you say, OK, we're going to give you a chance about cutting capital gains, give you a chance about cutting estate taxes, give you a chance about, what, purging voter rolls, give you... That's not sincere.
You think of how about Paul Ryan on poverty? I mean, is there any Republican doing any policy that opens your mind to a Republican? Any Republican?
Not to my, it doesn't, you know.
On any issue, I'm not saying just on the conversation on race, but are there issues around which you could see being open to a Republican? Because you have problems with Hillary Clinton, right?
I have deep problems with Hillary Clinton. And right now, no Republican comes to mind. Paul Ryan, I have to take as insincere. I mean, think about this moment. How can I take Paul Ryan seriously? Right? When he talks about poverty, he talks about race, he backs up on, he backtracks on the comments he made earlier with regards to welfare and others, culture of poverty. And then when they say Trump is a racist, he doesn't condemn him, right? So it's okay to have a racist as your nominee, but yet you're going to be sincere in talking about these issues. it's just a contradiction.
You've gotten a lot of grief for this, and we don't have a lot of time here, and we ran over on that last block. But I got to ask you.
It's a shame.
I got to ask you. You've said that Donald Trump's more dangerous than the Ku Klux Klan,
right?
And yet you're not going to vote for Hillary Clinton,
right?
How do you reconcile that in your mind?
Well, I don't want to vote from a position of fear, right? I want to vote from a position of power. And to my mind, I live in a blue state, a relatively blue state. I can actually vote my conscience. I think if you live in a battleground state, it makes sense to me to vote for Hillary Clinton. But Hillary Clinton's politics aren't my politics. As she's courting Republicans, she's taking progressives for granted. And I think we don't need to let our fear of Donald Trump keep us from vetting the policies of Hillary Clinton.
All right, Dr. Eddie Glaude Jr., thank you for coming. We're going to have you back with more time soon.
Sure.
Because we got to talk some more. Coming up, Donald Trump's secret teleprompter after this. Okay, so everyone's quick to point out that Donald Trump doesn't normally use a teleprompter. He's off the cuff, then he ad-libs, and that's part of what makes him a different kind of presidential candidate. But what if, and we don't have all the evidence, but what if this entire time Donald Trump has in fact been using a teleprompter, a secret teleprompter that only he can see? Our crack team of researchers investigated.
So I said, the founder of ICE, obviously I'm being sarcastic, then, but not that sarcastic, to be honest with you. You know, the little bing, 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 bum, bum. I love you very much. So Uma, she's married to Anthony Weiner, who's a perv. Bing, bing, bong, bong, bing, bing, bing. You know what that is, right? You know what I'm, look at my African-American over here. Look at him. Oh, here's another one. Go home to mom. Go home to mom. And your mother is voting for Trump. She's voting for Trump. True. Oh, wow. Paul O'Neill of the Yankees. Hey, Paul, you come from Ohio? I was only kidding. You can get the baby out of here. I love you, and I think it's a guy. I mean, I don't know. Who the hell cares? Oh, no, it's not. Beautiful. I like that much better. Now the poor guy, you got to see this guy. Oh, I don't know what I said. I don't remember. He's going like, I don't remember. Oh, maybe that's what I said. And I never expect to hear that from you again. She said, I never expect to hear that from you again. She said he's a p***y. That's terrible. Terrible.
Walk away from the lectern. We'll be right back.
Walk.
Head to BloombergPolitics.com right now for all the behind-the-scenes details of Trump's big trip to Mexico and what to expect from his immigration speech tonight. Coming up is Bloomberg West. Nicole is going to be here tomorrow. I may not be, but we will be virtually. Until then, we'll be together. Don't worry, virtually. Until tomorrow, from her and me, sayonara.
I'm Mark Crumpton. You're watching Bloomberg West. Let's begin with a check of your first word news. Republican presidential nominee Donald Trump held talks in Mexico with President Enrique Pena Nieto. Afterward, Trump defended the right to build a border wall.
We recognize and respect the right of either country to build a physical barrier or wall on any of its borders to stop the illegal movement of people, drugs, and weapons.
Trump scheduled to deliver an address on immigration tonight in Phoenix, Arizona. Hillary Clinton told an American Legion audience in Cincinnati, Ohio, that Trump's trip can't make up for a year of what she called insults and insinuations about Mexico. Dilma Rousseff's attorney says the former Brazilian president will appeal her removal from office. Rousseff today became the second president to be impeached in Brazil's 31-year-old democracy, but legislators decided not to ban Rousseff from seeking public office in the future. The first commercial flight between the U.S. and Cuba in more than half a century touched down today in Santa Clara. Regular air service was discontinued at the height of the Cold War. Global news 24 hours a day, powered by more than 2,600 journalists and analysts in over 120 countries. I'm Mark Crumpton. This is Bloomberg. Bloomberg West is next.
And this is Bloomberg West. Coming up, Salesforce slides as the software giant faces steeper competition than ever in the cloud. Plus, regulatory filings shed new light on how and, more importantly, when the Tesla Solar City merger came about. Our automotive team has the details. And Palo Alto Networks plummeting after reporting weaker than expected guidance. Yet analysts remain upbeat on the stock. We'll hear from the cybersecurity firm's CEO ahead. First, to our lead. Salesforce shares are sliding in after-hours hours trading, the company forecasts third-quarter sales that may face some pressure in a more competitive cloud market than ever. Longtime rival Oracle has been making some headway here and is now a bigger threat after buying NetSuite. Microsoft's commercial cloud business is adding more to its top line. And remember, Microsoft beat out Salesforce with that winning bid for the biggest tech deal of the year, $26.2 billion for LinkedIn. And with that, Salesforce has been on its own buying spree, spending more on acquisitions since February than it did in all of 2015. Here's CEO Mark Benioff talking about that on the earnings call.
It's been an incredible time for us to acquire some phenomenal assets, and I've never been more excited about Salesforce and our product line, and coming into Dreamforce, like I said, is just awesome.
So is the strategy paying off? Our Bloomberg intelligence analyst Anurag Rana joins us now in New York to break down all the results. So Anurag, what's your big takeaway here, given the stock move?
You know, the biggest thing that we heard on the call was there was some deal slippage in the quarter, largely at the end of July, and which is why the billings number were below what the street was expecting. And I think that is the primary reason why the stock's down after market.
So Salesforce has been very acquisitive. They've announced $3.5 billion in deals in just the last few months. Is that masking what margins are actually doing?
Well, those numbers are right now not in the financials of the company. They will add to revenue base later on. What the company said right now was there were some execution issues at the end of the quarter. They said they will have addressed it. And we will see how the billings number come out in the third and the fourth quarter, because that is what is going to drive revenue growth for next year. But having said that, cloud competition is heating up. Oracle and SAP are spending a lot more money on marketing, spending a lot more money on sales, which may be impacting the growth rates of the pure play cloud companies.
So what is the product line coming up that Mark Benioff is so excited about, and how do you expect the next 3 months to be different from the last?
Well, that has been the case with Salesforce for some time. With their core product Sales Cloud, when it's been slowing down, they have new products coming up, like the Marketing Cloud that has been growing in the 20+% range. Then you have the App Cloud, which is also growing. With Demandware, they have an e-commerce platform, which is going to be another leg of product that will help them, get new customers or expand their current portfolio of products.
So talk to me a little bit about the shares here, because they've been underperforming the NASDAQ for the last 3 months. Do you expect that trend to continue over the next quarter, or will that change?
I think a lot would depend on how billings growth will come up in next quarter. I think, as the discussion went on today, they did not, say any big macroeconomic issues. They said, they had some issues in the U.S. and they've addressed it, and the pipeline's very strong. I think we really want to see whether that pipeline gets converted into deals, into the next quarter or not.
All right, Anurag Rana, our Bloomberg intelligence analyst. Salesforce shares on the move. Thanks so much for joining us. Turning now to Tesla, we have more details on how its planned merger with SolarCity came about. In an SEC filing today, we learned that Tesla CEO Elon Musk discussed the idea of a tie-up with his cousin, SolarCity CEO Lyndon Rive, sometime before February 29th, when Tesla's board was first briefed on this idea. The timeline is what's important here, because it's 4 months before Musk made the merger plan public, and more importantly, 3 months before a $1.4 billion share sale. Our Bloomberg News automotive reporter David Welch joins us now from Detroit, and talk to us about why this timeline clarification is such a big deal.
So the conversation started between Elon Musk and his cousin Lyndon Rive, as you said, in February. And Tesla's board looked at it in late February, and they basically tabled the discussion and didn't really touch it. So in May, we have this $1.4 billion stock offering. And 13 days after that, Tesla's board starts hiring attorneys and a financial advisor, Evercore, to really start to look at this deal with SolarCity. And then by June, they make the proposal. So the board did table the discussion, but not long after they do the share offering, they're really gaining momentum on this. And the reason that's important is the people who bought those shares were buying in Tesla Motors, an electric car company. They didn't know that a potential merger was coming and that they could end up owning shares in a company that makes cars and solar panels. And by the way, a solar company that burns a lot of cash and is going to need to raise a lot more money going forward.
So is this unusual compared to how other mergers come about? I mean, I assume a lot of talk happens before anything is official or even officially explored. So is it legal, or is this going to raise red flags with the SEC?
Well, it is legal in the sense that they hadn't really decided to make a proposal to Solar City yet. And that's where they're certainly clean on the deal. Where it gets a little bit sticky, first off, there's the appearance with shareholders that they knew they wanted to do a deal like this when they did the secondary offering, and it gathered a lot of momentum afterwards. And there are requirements that if there's a high likelihood or any kind of likelihood of a deal, that you may have to disclose that. It's not really cut and dry as to whether they should have disclosed this and whether regulators would look into it. But you did have some shareholders who didn't like the deal, which is evidenced by the fact that shares went down 10% on the first trading day after it was proposed. And that's where you could have shareholder unrest. You could have some shareholders suing over it, potentially, if they really think that they were not given all the information before they bought into that secondary offering. So there could be some controversy here.
So how are investors and analysts feeling about this deal now? I mean, has sentiment changed now that we're farther away from it?
Some of the larger shareholders have bought more Tesla shares, so there is some desire to see this kind of conglomerate of batteries, electric cars, and solar panels come together, and that could work for them. There's still some investors who don't like the deal. They don't like how things were disclosed, and they're not crazy about the fact that the CEOs of the two companies are cousins. Elon Musk is a 20% shareholder in both, and that he also owns a big chunk of debt. And Solar City does need to raise money. That's another thing we learned in this filing, is that the company really has been trying to raise more funds all summer long and is worried about liquidity. And in fact, we're getting closer and closer to being in default of their debt covenants. They haven't yet. They're still on firm ground that way, but they're getting closer and closer to it. So you get down to a question of, are the companies too close? Is Tesla essentially bailing out Solar City because of the company's cash problems? And is it just too much for Tesla to bite off when they're trying to get new models out and satisfy their own cash requirements? These are all questions shareholders have, and we'll see when they schedule a vote how it all comes out.
Right. Certainly an interesting familial twist. We'll be watching just to see if this garners any additional regulatory attention. Our Bloomberg News reporter David Welch in Detroit, thank you. Turning now to another top story, continued fallout from the EU's ruling that Apple owes more than $14 billion in back taxes. U.S. Treasury Secretary Jack Lew was asked about the decision today in Washington.
Look, I have raised the issue that the pattern of the actions certainly appears to be highly focused on U.S. firms. They point to some smaller actions against non-U.S. firms, but the largest actions do appear to be aimed squarely at our tax base.
Lew went on to say that tax laws should make it impossible to escape taxes, and he's seeing a growing consensus in Congress to move forward with such tax reform. Coming up, cybersecurity software maker Palo Alto Networks adjusts its forecast for next year. Wall Street reacts. We'll hear from CEO Mark McLaughlin next. This is Bloomberg.